Jutian, starting from the stand user. Chapter 11, The Spring of Hugo Mandan. Chapter 11, The Spring of Hugo Mandan. After the two protagonists walked away, Johnny couldn't suppress his curiosity and asked Jiro, "Do you believe what he said?" Jello replied with great certainty. Some of what he said was true, but there were more lies. "Will he be our enemy?" Jiro shook his head and replied, "It's hard to say for sure right now, but the president is also his enemy. Our goals are different from his." He couldn't understand this person. Luchin knew too much, and it was impossible for all of it to be told to him by the saint. So this must be his stand ability. What is his purpose in asking us to bring this rabbit? Johnny was very distrustful of Luchin. "I don't know, but he probably didn't lie to us about the saint's remains here. Maybe it has something to do with his stand ability." As they were talking, a few mushrooms on their horses' backs fell into the spring in the forest during the bumpy ride. Jiro had picked them up in the forest earlier and was going to stew them in the pot when he was about to cook. Suddenly, a short figure wearing a hat appeared and quickly disappeared into the woods. The two immediately became alert. They were a little worried about the sudden appearance of a figure in this sparsely populated forest, especially since Luchin had previously told them that the saint's remains were there. Jello reached for the iron ball at his waist, but it slipped out of his hand and fell into the spring. This made Jello even more panicked. Everything here was wrong. The two of them hurriedly rushed towards the direction where the figure disappeared. It was only by a big tree that the two of them could see clearly that the figure just now was a little girl. Johnny wanted to go up and talk to him, but Jello stopped him. Instead, the little girl took out a piece of gold and a diamond the size of a pigeon egg and asked, "Which one did you drop into the water, the gold or the diamond?" Everyone had heard of the legend of the river god. The two looked at each other and immediately realized that this girl must be the guardian of the remains. Considering Luchen's previous suggestion of making a lucky rabbit's foot, Jiro felt the saint's legs might be here. He carefully replied, "What I dropped into the river was an iron ball." The girl was very happy to hear this and stuffed all the things into Jello's hands. She said, "This is a reward for your honesty." Johnny felt that this test was too easy. But Jello had other ideas and threw more things into the spring, including a rabbit's left leg. He then succeeded in obtaining a large amount of wealth and the right hand of the saint. He then seemed to have received inspiration and disassembled the rabbit into its parts, throwing them into the spring. He then obtained a pair of saintly ears and a large amount of prey. The rest of the remains never appeared. Jiro pondered. Are these the only saint's remains here? This location doesn't seem difficult to find. Why didn't Luchin come and take the remains away? What was he planning? Hugh Mandan warned them, "Be sure to use all you have gained before the sun sets." Johnny wanted to return all the money he got to the little girl, but she refused and explained the rules to them both again. You must use up everything you get before the sun sets, and you cannot give it to others. Otherwise, it would be their turn to line up. Only then did the two men see many human faces on the side of the tree. These faces must have been living people before. This test might be more difficult than they thought. The two men took their found treasure and left. Luchin arrived at the tree where Hugh Mandan lived shortly after the two left. He had been following them, so the time difference was not too long. After carefully examining the tree for a moment, he prepared to leave. He had no intention of throwing anything into the spring. Who knew what purpose this huge pit had for? At this time, the little girl Hugo Mandan appeared from the tree house she lived in. She stared at Luchin with her blind eyes without saying anything. Seeing this, Luchin said to her with a smile, "Everything here will be over soon." Hugh Mandan looked at Luchin with a strange expression and replied, "The chosen one will end all of this, and you will be lucky enough to witness it." The one speaking at this moment might be the saint himself. Am I just a witness? Luchin couldn't help but mutter to himself. Luchin knew that in this world, corpses had their own will, and his own power was also triggered by the corpses. Hugo Mandan said firmly, "No one can possess this power alone, not even the saint himself." Shouldn't my existence be the only exception? My existence must have had an impact on the world. Instead of answering the question, Hugo Mandan turned back to the tree and looked at the faces growing on the sides of the tree. Her empty, blind eyes seemed to be able to see everything here. Luchin followed her to the side of the tree. Looking at the face on the trunk, he asked, "Do you think the two of them can untie the restraints here?" "They are the two chosen by God. All of us here exist for them." Hugh Mandan's tone was calm. "This tree must be hundreds of years old. When did all this begin? God saw this many years ago, and you can't change it. So everything that's happening now was planned by the saint many years ago? Do you think God would be satisfied if the script turned out exactly as the saint had predicted? Or did the saint just set the stage? No one can decide the fate of mankind. All choices are made by ourselves." Really? Luchin didn't believe this at all. In JoJo, fate is predetermined. Suga Mandan didn't respond to Lu Chen's words. This person's existence was like a go piece on a chessboard. It didn't play any role, but it was very conspicuous. Since fate has made him involved, there must be a meaning for his existence. Luchin looked at the little girl and continued, "You've been here for over 50 years, right? You haven't grown at all. What will happen to you and the people in the tree after the two of them complete their so-called mission? Has time really left no trace on you? I have understood the mission God has placed on us, and today our mission will be completed." Hugh Mandan ignored the horror in Lu Chen's words. Luchin couldn't help but sigh. This story is really cruel. It's time for you to leave. If you really want to get involved, why don't you catch up with them quickly? You should understand the rules here. Suga Mandan ignored Lu Chen's sigh. "So I can't change the outcome of this story, right?" End of this chapter. Chapter 12 Yellow Bird. Chapter 12 Yellow Bird. After Hugh Mandan ordered him to leave, Luchin tactfully left. This person who looked like a little girl was at least 60 years old. Of course, the final question remains unanswered. Since fate is fixed, can one gain more benefits from this predetermined destiny? I'm afraid that with my current strength, I'm not even qualified to touch the complete body. It seems that there is a setting that people with selfish desires cannot pick up the complete body. As his thoughts wandered, he couldn't help but think of that terrifying name. Fortunately, Tulong hadn't been born yet in this era. Disaster didn't have a spokesperson at the moment, so naturally, it wouldn't come looking for you just because you thought of a miracle. So, is there a chance for him to get the Rokakaka fruit? Luchin barely remembered that Rokakaka seemed to have been first discovered on the island of New Guinea. Unfortunately, he wasn't very familiar with the 8th installment. He'd only given it a quick glance. Perhaps he could look for it after finishing his work here. I don't know what the function of the door in my mind that needs to be charged is. According to Lu Chen's analysis, this door should be able to lead to another world. Lu Chen's mind was full of random thoughts as the horse slowly moved along the road. The trees on both sides began to decrease and large farms began to appear. Not far ahead, a group of people were measuring something around a piece of land. One of them was crying loudly. Luchin was curious and went over. Of course, he had to join in the fun. A farmer was regretting his previous transaction because he discovered a gold mine in the land he had just exchanged today. The people around him listened to his constant regrets. He had so much wasteland, but he casually exchanged the only piece with gold mine. Luchin Rao, mingling in the crowd, listened with interest. The others were also very happy. This kind of thing was a great pleasure for them. Behind the crowd of onlookers, a small team of 11 people rode their horses in unison and galloped towards the town. They did not see Luchin mixed in with the crowd. It's also possible that their targets were only Johnny and Jiro. The president should have assigned different tasks to different people. These people might not even be aware of Lu Chen's existence. A knowledgeable villager sighed, "This team is full of skilled fighters. I never wanted to face such opponents when I participated in the war before." Although these 11 people are jokingly called the Free 11, in fact their fighting ability is not bad. Luchin slowly set off only after these people had left for a long time. After walking a short while longer, a town appeared in the distance. Luchin glanced at the sun. It was probably around 3 p.m. at this point. It would still be a long time before the sunset. Sitting at the gate of the town, Luchin thought that he must have been involved in this dispute when he got the saint's spine. Could his appearance affect the fate of others? I wonder if Aaron can safely return to his hometown to save his family. If he survives, it means his presence will affect the fate of others to some extent. Perhaps because he is not a major character, his survival or failure does not affect the ripples of fate. At this moment, the door in my mind has not been completely illuminated, so I can't do anything too extreme. In this world, the power of fate is the most terrifying. After sitting at the town gate and resting for an hour, I suddenly heard gunshots in the town and a conflict broke out inside. Listening to the dense gunfire in the town, Luchin realized that the fight for the hands and ears of the remains must be intense. Jiro and Johnny were certain to win, for fate was on their side. After undergoing this inner struggle, Johnny suddenly understood why the Oriental man had told him to bring the rabbit and why luck was paramount. He had known many things in advance, but hadn't shared them with him. Jello gradually recovered from his plant state. The remaining man among the 11 hurriedly rode his horse towards the town exit. When he ran out of the town and just breathed a sigh of relief, a strange figure appeared and knocked his horse down with a punch. Luchin, who had been waiting at the door early, was waiting for him to appear. As soon as he saw the enemy appear, Luchin immediately activated his stand to attack. The horse fell sideways to the ground, and the enemy was thrown to the side. He struggled to get up from the ground. But Luchin wouldn't give him this chance. He quickly stepped forward, raised his pistol, and fired several shots, killing the enemy in front of him. The door in his mind was recharged. Then he stepped forward and took the saint's ears and right hand, which he was holding. The body melted into the body as soon as he took it. There was no left hand, so it seemed the body's left hand was still in Johnny's hand. As the remains merged into his body, the light of the door in his mind suddenly appeared. Luchin had an intuition that if he killed another stand user or found the remains of a saint, the charging of the door in his mind would be complete. The body must have been traded to him by Johnny, which was Luchin's main reason for not going to the Hugo Mandan Spring to retrieve the saint's remains himself. If you want to gain, you will inevitably lose. Waiting patiently is the best way to obtain the body. Then Luchin squatted beside the corpse and began to check whether he was carrying any intelligence, as he might have orders from the president. Finding some money can also facilitate the next journey. Touching the corpse is an important process. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded behind him, and at the same time, a revolver was pointed at Luchin's back. "Sir, please put the gun down and turn around slowly. Not too quickly. Otherwise, I might shoot." Luchin slowly put the pistol in his hand on the ground. His stand-in suddenly appeared, hardened the cloak behind him, and then knocked the gun pointing at him away with a punch. It was only then that Luchin saw through his stand-in that the person coming was actually Cowboy Mandan Tim. Because Luchin had taken the saint's spine and killed Brook Moya in advance, he was able to live here safely. If he reaches this position, the president should be not far away. Fate will continue to gather these people in the network together, and the more they struggle, the faster this process will be. Only the saint's legs and torso remain, yet to be found. However, the legs aren't far from here. Once all the parts are found, they will inevitably be brought together by the power of fate. This is an inevitable process. In Mandentim's eyes, Luchin was a murderer and robber. He had just killed a traveler coming out of town and was now robbing him. As a man with a strong sense of justice, he could not allow such a thing to happen. End of this chapter. Chapter 13. Mandentim. After his gun was knocked out of his hand, Mandentim immediately fought back. He first split his body into several parts along the rope. A hand suddenly appeared in front of Luchin. Luchin held his hardened cloak in front of him, unable to touch his ropes, or he would break them into pieces. While this ability wasn't fatal, it was troublesome. A substitute made of steel emerged and attacked Mandentim. As his body stretched out, Mandentim's other hand picked up the pistol that had been knocked away. Instantly, he fired several shots at Luchin. However, all the bullets were blocked by the metal cloak. At the same time, Luchin shouted at Mandentim, "I am not your enemy. This man is an assassin sent by Valentine. You are on Lucy's side, right?" Johnny and Jello told me about you. Johnny and Jiro hadn't mentioned Mandentum to Lu Chan, but that didn't stop him from saying so. After all, the two protagonists were in this town. Whenever Lu Chan and Mandentum appeared in front of Johnny, they would never discuss the issue. After hearing this, Mandentum released his ability, but he remained on guard. Lu Chen's next move would determine whether he would continue the attack. After Lu Chen saw that he had regained his composure, he immediately removed his substitute. Then he slowly walked up to Mandentum and said, "Johnny and Jiro should be in this town. I met them in the woods before. They were going to participate in a competition, so we didn't go together. But we haven't been apart for long, so they should still be in town." "How do you know them?" Mandentum asked his question. The man in front of him didn't look like he was lying. "I knew them before the competition started. Didn't Jello duel with a thief at that time?" Mandentum knew this fun, and when he saw that Lu Chen didn't seem to be lying, he relaxed his guard. So he asked, "Have you found any clues on him? Does he have any instructions from the president?" Nothing was found except $12. They must have communicated over the phone. Touching the $12, Lu Chen secretly complained in his heart that working for the president didn't seem to pay much. Then he took out a few of them and handed them to Mandentum, saying, "Whoever sees the spoil shall have a share." Mandentum waved his hands repeatedly to reject Lu Chen's kindness, which always made him feel like he was his accomplice in highway robbery. "I didn't take part in the fight, so the spoils don't belong to me. Although cowboys sometimes took spoils from bandits." Seeing that Mandentum didn't want it, Lu Chen stuffed it all into his pocket. The US dollar is still very valuable these days. If I plan to go to New Guinea in the future, I have to start planning the travel expenses now. I don't know how much it costs to travel to other countries these days. After seeing Lu Chen put the money into his pocket, Mandentum continued to ask, "You said Johnny and Jello are here?" "They should be here. We just separated from the woods this morning. They shouldn't be moving very fast. Besides, they still had to find a way to spend the money and then face the attack of the 11. They should be drinking together in the snow right now, which is a famous scene. Then let's go into the city and look for them together," Mandentum suggested. Although he already believed Lu Chen, he still needed to confirm it. If he lied again, he couldn't afford to be fooled. Lu Chen understood what he was thinking and nodded in agreement. "Let's go then. I think they're both still in the city. It's a good opportunity to get more information about this group. They certainly don't have much information about the president, but you can ask them what they think of Hugh Mandan." Seeing that Lu Chen showed no sign of resistance, Mandentum returned his revolver to his waistband. He had been keeping a close eye on Lu Chen. No matter what he said, he wouldn't let down his guard until he was truly convinced he was a friend. This was fundamental to being a cowboy. Lu Chen also put the gun back on his waist and then asked, "Why are you here? Is Mr. Steele nearby?" "If Steele is here, Valentine should be nearby as well." Seeing that Lu Chen seemed to be aware of what was happening to him, Mandentum explained, "That's probably the case. I learned that the president had sent 2 assassins to find the saint's legs, so I followed their footsteps, but I didn't meet them." Lu Chen guessed that the 2 people were probably Majid and Vika Bibbo. Had Lucy successfully infiltrated the president's side? So, because of his presence, Lucy was not suspected? So who holds the saint's heart now? Because the changes he has undergone have gradually caused Lu Chen to lose his intelligence advantage. As expected, the current situation is a mess. Then let's go to the city first. On the other side, the president, who had been waiting for contact from the 11, realized their failure. The failure of the 11 men left the president unable to remain calm. Although the men he had sent out successfully obtained the saint's legs, this still couldn't mask his own decline. According to his plan, he now had to possess at least half of the saint's remains. So now we have to go and retrieve the remaining parts. Except for the torso, the rest have already been revealed. Valentine decided to send all his men out now to recapture the various parts. The first was the Oriental man who was not in his plan. He seemed to know the location of the remains and was also following the map. And the Sandman seemed to have betrayed himself after coming into contact with that Oriental man. Although Valentine had little hope for this Indian, his blatant betrayal was unforgivable. For now, he could only let him go, primarily because he had no remains and he was short on manpower. Once he had the remains, he would make sure he knew the consequences of betrayal. The president ordered his men, Maget, Yu, and Wika Bibbo, go get the bodies from Johnny and Jello. Majit, Vika Bibbo, Disco, Mike O, and others expressed their loyalty to the president. Valentine was about to personally take the saint's spine from Lu Chen's hands. This was the most important part, and he had to do it himself. After obtaining Jiro's saint's right eye, Lucy has been looking for an opportunity to seize the saint's heart from the president. However, since the president's plan has not been progressing smoothly during this period, he has tightened his defense on his side, and she has not found a good opportunity. End of this chapter. Chapter 14, The Ball Hits the Net. Chapter 14, The Ball Hits the Net when Lu Chen and Mandan Tim found Johnny and his partner after asking around in the city. They were sitting in the snow, drinking a bottle of cheap red wine. Johnny looked calm, a man who had been through a lot. Jello was a little surprised that Mandentim and Lu Chen arrived together. The two of them actually met each other. Lu Chen spoke first before anyone else. I said it wouldn't be long before we meet again. Jiro nodded helplessly, then said with a slightly teasing tone, "It's indeed not too long, not even more than a day. So have you been following us all the time?" He is a relatively lively person. Mandentim lowered his guard only after he saw that he knew the men. Johnny felt the body parts in Lu Chen's body. It was obvious that the body he had just exchanged fell into his hands, and the bodies could sense each other. This made Johnny feel a little disappointed, as if he had been tricked by the Oriental man in front of him. Lu Chen nodded. "Of course, there is only one way forward. It is inevitable that I will follow behind you." Jiro noticed Johnny's expression and asked thoughtfully, "It seems you've finally gotten the saint's ears. You should know the rules of the Hugo Mandan Spring, right?" Although it was a question, he was very sure that Lu Chen knew the rules. He might even know how to obtain the remains. Seeing this, Lu Chen did not quibble and answered frankly, "Of course, I know the rules. If you want to get something, you must first give it up. Only those who dare to give everything can finally gain everything." Johnny said with a hint of complaint in his tone, "But it seems that you haven't given up anything. You are the ones who need to be tested, not me. The saint's remains will not fall into my hands in the end. I just hold it for a period of time. So fate will not test someone who is not in its plan. Obviously, I am such a person." The two were sure that it was Lu Chen who took the saint's body that Johnny had given to the assassin, but as mentioned before, Johnny would not give the body to Lu Chen even if he found it, so the body would naturally belong to whoever got it. As for whether Johnny would agree after hearing Lu Chen's explanation, no one knew. Mandentim understood a little bit. It turned out that when he met Lu Chen before, he was really killing and robbing, but the other party was just an assassin sent by the president. So he asked Johnny the question that concerned him most. "How long do you plan to keep the body?" "I will hand over the body to the most appropriate person at the appropriate time. As for who is the right person, it depends on the specific circumstances at the time. All rights of interpretation belong to Lu Chen." Jiro stopped dwelling on the body's whereabouts and asked a different question. "So this is your stand ability? You know things that others don't. If someone could predict the future, it would be much easier to deal with the president." Lu Chen did not answer directly. Maybe it is impolite to directly ask others about their stand abilities. Think about what Dongfang Xianju said about stand-ins. At least you could tell us about Valentine's abilities. You should know quite a bit about him. He's the enemy of all of us, isn't he? Even if we knew about the president's stand ability in advance, it would be difficult to deal with it, so it doesn't matter if we tell these three people. Thinking of this, Lu Chen spoke. "Do you believe in parallel worlds?" Jiro frowned and replied, "Since you ask, it seems that there is, so you're from a parallel world?" If that was the case, it would explain why Lu Chen knew so many things. He came from a parallel world. Lu Chen understood that Jiro and the others had misunderstood him, so he quickly explained, "No, I'm not from a parallel world. What I want to tell you is that Valentine can travel to a parallel world. And there are an infinite number of parallel worlds." The three of them were confused. What good could it mean to be able to travel to a parallel world? Could he have obtained other information in advance? Luchin continued to explain to the three people. His stand ability allows him to synchronize the memories of his selves in different parallel worlds. Once his original body dies, the self in the parallel world will take his place, so he has countless lives. Perhaps the self in this world has already died. An unkillable enemy made all three of them feel terrified. Luchin glanced at the two cheaters. Diego's methods were definitely not suitable for them. But Yafor was capable of interdimensional attacks. Chu Mimi would personally cross the dimensional wall to beat him up. This seems to be related to gravity. Let the protagonist discover this on his own. We can't tell you all the information at once. The so-called growth is to let the protagonist discover the secrets on his own. There should be limits on Valentine's ability to travel across dimensions, right? It's true that there are necessary conditions for activation, but they're not restrictions. They can be easily met. After all, there are strengths and weaknesses among stands. For example, Mandentum's abilities aren't very strong, and my own abilities aren't particularly impressive either. Perhaps it's because I haven't developed them yet. These simple abilities are generally quite powerful. What is the use of the Saint's Remains? Although almost everyone was fighting for it, Mandentum actually didn't know. Jiro should know this feeling. The existence of saints is, of course, to trigger miracles. Jiro picked up the remaining half bottle of red wine on the ground, gave some to the two people who had just arrived, and said, "We are toasting to the ball that hit the net." That's a good reason, Luchin praised repeatedly. The fate of the others was almost certain. Only he was the one who hit the net and flew up. So he took the glass and drank it all in one gulp. Mandentum thought for a moment and invited Luchin. "Since I have already withdrawn from the competition, why don't you come with me?" He wanted to keep the body by his side. Luchin shook his head and rejected Mandentum's invitation to go with him. "I plan to go back and take a look at Hugh Mandan. Johnny has completed the Saints test. Those who were imprisoned in the tree should be released. They're at least from decades ago. I plan to go back and see if they have changed." Luchin wanted to see what fate had done to them. At the moment when the power of the saints disappears, will the power of time reappear in them? What is their current state? Hopefully, thanks to the saints' miracle, they will be unharmed. Will the substitutes made of spring water and trees disappear after the test of the remains is over? Mandentum would not give up his idea easily. "I am actually quite interested in the people from decades ago. Why not take me with you to see them? It's very dangerous to follow me. You must have other things to do." Luchin once again refused his request to go with him. End of this chapter. Chapter 15 Journey. Jiro, on the other hand, deduced some questions from Luchin's words. Since there are infinite parallel worlds, what's so special about ours? Valentine shouldn't need to be obsessed with our world. Why bother dragging himself from other worlds into this? Because the saints' remains are unique, there are no saints' remains in other worlds. Only this world is special. This is the basic world. There are no saints in other worlds. Johnny was a little surprised after hearing this. I don't know whether there are saints in other worlds, but what is certain is that only this world has the remains of saints. It is said that only the basic world has the remains of saints, and the other worlds should have saints. Is that so? Does that mean there are no stand users in other worlds? Johnny only knew that the remains of saints could inspire stands, and he knew almost nothing else. Stands aren't just activated by corpses, they're a person's spiritual power, and sometimes they awaken naturally without external stimulation. Luchin explained some basic concepts. At the end of the comic, Zero successfully activated his own stand, the Iron Ball Destroyer, through his own skill. What's the difference between the parallel world and the basic world besides the remains of the saint? I don't know, I haven't been to a parallel world. The comics don't talk about the basic situation of the parallel world. Shouldn't you know this? Jello kept testing Luchin. Intelligence-type stands are not as powerful as you think. How could I know everything that happens outside the parallel world? Taking Erchio's stand as an example, it is impossible for him to know so many things. Even the most powerful intelligence-type stand does not know as much as Luchin. Jiro didn't know whether he believed it or not. Then let's just leave it at that. For a moment, Johnny actually wanted to attack Lu Chen and snatch the body away, but Lu Chen was too unpredictable. He didn't know if his opponent would expect him to attack now. He didn't know if Jiro and Mandan Tim would help him if he attacked directly. Lu Chen saw that he had almost finished talking, so he said goodbye to the three of them. I'm going to go back and see Hugo Mandan again. Do you have anything to say to her? Johnny shook his head and said, I understand the test the Saints remains posed to me, but I don't have anything to say to her. Jiro frowned and asked, the tree should have been freed by now. Is there any point in going back to see it? Is it the same as in fairy tales? The princess and the prince lived happily ever after. The ending of the story doesn't tell us what happens to the dwarfs. I have to go and see what kind of ending the supporting characters of the story will have. I'm pretty sure I'm a supporting character in this story. Lu Chen answered with a hint of meaning in his tone. Then who is the protagonist? Us or the president? Jiro asked his own question based on the test that Lu Chen had mentioned before. What kind of story do you think this will be? Is it about fate, enlightenment, or growth? I hope this is a fairy tale and I can achieve victory like the knight in the story. Achieve my goal. Jello replied with a grin showing his gold teeth. Lu Chen took off his hat and said to Jialuo, I hope that after this long journey, you can overcome your fate. This is my most sincere blessing for you. Jiro sensed the respect in Lu Chen's words. He always showed respect to nature. Nature understood Lu Chen's meaning. It seemed his fate wasn't destined to end well. He suddenly grinned, his gold teeth etched, and said, at least it'll be a good story, right? By this point, he had come to his senses. If fate couldn't be changed, then at least make this journey more fulfilling. So, Johnny was the protagonist of this journey. He felt honored for his friend. He hoped that at the end of the story, he would have a fulfilling journey. Yes, it will be a wonderful story. What role will you play in this story? I don't know. I hope the story will eventually change because of my existence. Valentine's stand requires him to be at an angle between two objects. Then Lu Chen took out the saint's right hand and threw it to Johnny, saying, take it. I'll give you this part first. I still have a use for the rest. Perhaps I will just hand the remaining parts over to the president. I hope you won't blame me. The gathering of the remains is inevitable from a story perspective. The president will inevitably obtain all the remains, so it doesn't matter who holds the remains now. In the end, it will all be gathered in the hands of the person chosen by fate. Johnny didn't understand what he heard, but Jello already understood a lot. For the first time, Jiro felt a fondness for this oriental man in front of him. I hope this won't be the last time I see you. If this story really has an ending, then I hope I can have another drink with you at the end of the journey. Hope to see you in New York if I ever get there. Goodbye. Lu Chen waved to Johnny and Jiro, then set off with Mandentim to see Hugh Mandan. Mandentim insisted on following Lu Chen, his curiosity now growing even stronger. What kind of courage did it take to casually hand over the remains of a saint to someone else? Mandentim rode his horse and followed Lu Chen, and Lu Chen's horse also listened to Mandentim more. What about me in the story you're telling? Lu Chen glanced at him and replied, you are no longer in this story. Why don't you choose a better ending for yourself? Before fate drags you back into this story. Struggling will only make the net tighter. A cowboy never deserts a battlefield. I have been looking for an end since I started this journey. Now I can see it. I will not give up because of your words. Mandentim answered nonchalantly. At least every character in JoJo is very aware, and that is their charm. Looking at Lu Chen's departing back. Johnny held the saint's right hand and asked Jiro in confusion, what did this oriental man say to you in the end? Nothing. Just telling me that no matter which way the ball lands, I should accept it. We should move on. Johnny, lesson 3. Trust the spin. Just trust it. Johnny also understood that Jello might suffer misfortune at the end of this journey, which made him afraid of this journey. End of this chapter. Chapter 16d4c. When the two came out of the town, the sun had already set completely. It's hard to walk after dark. Why don't you go tomorrow? I don't know if they'll still be there tomorrow, so I want to go check it out now. You don't have to come with me. Mandentim suddenly asked, your stand's ability is not actually to obtain intelligence. You can see the future, right? Otherwise, you don't need to take a look. And the future you know does not include you. You are afraid of your future fate. The tone of confirmation was beyond doubt, and Luchin did not need to answer this question. These people were indeed more perceptive than the other. I had only given them some information, but they had already guessed the situation on my side. After Luchin pulled the horse back, he asked, "You're worried about the saint's remains, right? But you don't have the confidence to take it from me. You don't really want the saint's remains, so what drives you to keep moving forward?" Of course, it's the glory of a cowboy. Do you think death is something to be feared? Having already died once, Luchin thought carefully about it. He used to despise death, but the moment he fell from the mountain, his thoughts changed. Only when facing death will the most primitive fear arise. Yes, death is something to be feared. Luchin nodded affirmatively. When I was about to die of thirst in the clutches of the devil, I was also so afraid of death. But in the end, I realized that what I feared was not death itself. It was the loneliness of having nowhere to go, the loneliness of being extremely empty. He is also a person who has faced death. Since everyone has their own values, no one should try to criticize anyone else. The remains of the saints will eventually come together to form a whole. This is inevitable in fate, so there is no need to worry too much about the remains. I will die in this inevitable process, right? Just like Jello will also die in the torrent of fate. Mandentim has already realized it. Perhaps. Mandentim interrupted Luchin and said, "Since this is an inevitable fate, it must be unchangeable, right? Then I must find my inner home while I am still alive." The two of them set out on their journey again in the twilight. After traveling for a while, they arrived at the Hugo Mandan spring again. It was already late at night. The faces in the trees had all vanished, and any trace of human presence had vanished. It was as if Hugh Mandan had never existed. The tree released all the people it had captured, but where were the traces of their departure? Luchin searched carefully. Mandentim looked at Luchin's actions and said, "What did you find?" This place was a place similar to the Devil's Palm in the morning. Now that the power of the remains has disappeared, everything has changed. I'm asking what you learned about fate? I don't know anything. It's so peaceful here, as if nothing has happened. It's as if their presence is truly to hand over the remains to the person being tested. What are you worried about? Luchin was worried that fate had spent so much effort to set up such a stage, and whether he would be included in it. There's a tree hole here where you can rest for the night. We'll start again tomorrow. Don't worry too much about fears that haven't come yet. Fear is inevitable and will come to you. The two rested in the tree house until they set out again the next morning. After leaving the Hugh Mandan spring, we set out on the road again. This time, we found nothing. It was almost noon. Mandentim suddenly pulled out the pistol from his waist with a serious expression, as the enemy was attacking. Luchin saw a most unexpected enemy on the side of the road, Fawny Valentine. Shouldn't Valentine, the boss, appear at the end? Why is he here? What boss would show up before all the minions are defeated? Luchin blurted out, "Fuck. Why is the president here?" Then Valentine disappeared from the spot. He reappeared soon after. Valentine was also a little surprised and said, "I can't find you in any parallel world. It seems that you are also unique." Valentine originally planned to use the mutual annihilation of two people from different dimensions to deal with Luchin, but unexpectedly, after searching several worlds, Luchin did not exist in any of them. So he could only pull a Mandentim from another world. After meeting another Mandentim, Luchin warned him, "Don't touch the other you. The same objects from different worlds will be destroyed when they touch each other." Mandentim sensed something was amiss when he saw his other self and immediately replied, "I'll be careful." Could that be our enemy? I don't know. There is a gap between parallel worlds. If there is no fight for the remains, will Mandentim, as the sheriff, be the president's subordinate? The president looked at Luchin with a strange expression. "It seems you know a lot about me. Then I need to make you leave here completely." Suddenly, people from all directions started shooting at Luchin. Almost all of them had a big president between them. There weren't just one or two presidents here. D4C had brought dozens of them into this world. They all raised their guns and fired at Luchin. The bullets were too dense, coming at us from all directions. The condition of being sandwiched between two objects was too broad. The steel of the stand's body was immediately activated. Although skin is of course soft, at this moment Lu Chen's skin was as hard as steel. This was Lu Chen's newly developed use of the stand's ability. The bullets only caused a slight pain when they hit the surface of my body, and the enemy's bullets failed to penetrate my armor. However, Lu Chen took the full impact, and I could only be thankful that the impact of bullets in this era was not very strong. Then Lu Chen shook the cloak behind him, and as usual, the cloak covered Lu Chen to avoid bullets. Suddenly, there were some subtle differences in the surrounding scene. The most important thing was that Mandentim beside him disappeared. The presidents in all directions also disappeared. Lu Chen immediately realized that he had been sent to a parallel world by the president. The cloak he had been using for defense was used by Valentine, and the cloak formed a sandwich with the ground. Once the conditions were met, Valentine could naturally activate his ability. So Lu Chen was tricked by his own actions, and Valentine took advantage of Lu Chen's actions and threw him into a parallel world. Diego seemed to have been sent to a parallel world in the same way. End of this chapter. Chapter 17. Trading. At this time, a great president appeared in front of Lu Chen. After all, the body was now on Lu Chen. People like Mandentim were not important to him. More presidents continued to appear from the gap between the two objects, and bullets continued to be fired at them densely. Lu Chen's metallic skin can block the damage from the bullet, but the impact of the bullet alone causes great harm to Lu Chen. Lu Chen tried to give himself the fluidity of mercury to allow the bullet to pass through his body. Unfortunately, he couldn't do this with his current strength. The growth of the stand required continuous development. Perhaps after obtaining the insect arrow, he would evolve this ability. Heartsteel flew towards the nearest president and punched him through the body. But most of the presidents didn't even frown, they just kept firing. Luckily, two bullets collided with each other beside Lu Chen, and the bullets were immediately destroyed. A powerful force knocked Lu Chen to the ground. Fortunately, Lu Chen was now very strong. The fall to the ground did not cause any greater damage. D4C flew directly towards Lu Chen. Although D4C did not attack many times in the comics, it actually had both strength and speed. When Heartsteel started fighting him, the difference in their attributes was immediately apparent. Although there is not much difference in speed between the two stands, the power of Heartsteel is still far behind that of the president's D4C. D4C suppressed Lu Chen's substitute, the steel of the body. If the stalemate continues, defeat is inevitable. In another world, Mandentim saw Lu Chen suddenly disappear from his side and immediately started shooting at the president. He didn't know what his companion had endured, but he thought his fate had ended here. Perhaps his own end would also be here. That Oriental man who had tried so hard to avoid his fate actually died here before me. How tragic. The remaining presidents fired at Mandentim, but he dodged the fatal bullets by splitting his body, while some less fatal bullets still managed to hit him. You are the sheriff of the country. Why do you resist my will? You must know that my will is the will of the country. I will bring happiness to this country. And you are now blocking the path to happiness for this country. Put down your gun and show your loyalty to me. You will be part of the future of this happy country. Valentine asked Mandentim, and at this moment he was in a good position to win, so he was now qualified to speak. Mandentim's response was only one bullet. After emptying his gun, he slowly spoke. I don't see that your actions are for the sake of this country. Everyone in this country is free. Even you, the president, cannot decide the fate of others at will. Of course, Lucy is also a major reason for Mandentim. Valentine laughed contemptuously. Haha, people like you have no patriotism at all. A lowly person like you cannot understand the great mission of patriotism. He now had no room for mercy for this man who had no patriotism. D4C is unique, so in the basic world, the presidents are suppressing Mandentim with bullets. Mandentim used his stand ability to dismantle the remaining presidents one by one. None of the presidents feared death. This was necessary to bring happiness to the nation. More bullets severely wounded Mandentim. His abilities were still too weak. In the parallel world, the suppressed Luchin felt he couldn't continue like this. His defeat was inevitable against the Stanze level. So now I have to find a way to change this situation. Luchin suddenly shouted at the president, "You should be able to tell that I'm not from this world, so I have a way to leave. Don't force me to leave this world with part of my remains. That world isn't a parallel world. Once you lose my remains, you'll never get them back." D4C stopped what he was doing. Then a Valentine stepped out from the shadows. After seeing D4C stop, Luchin took a breath and then proposed a deal to Valentine. It doesn't necessarily have to be the remains of the saint. All I've been pursuing is power. This world seems to be vying for diamonds. You give me the diamonds, and I'll give you the saint's spine. What the world is fighting for seems to be a diamond with magical powers. The body is unique, but the diamond is not, so there is a possibility that the diamond could be taken away by Luchin. Johnny in the parallel world wins by doing nothing. In fact, as Valentine himself said, the body loved him, so it was inevitable that the body would fall into his hands. Because in this story, he is the only one who possesses the belief of selflessness. He doesn't even care about his own life. Johnny also possessed the body later, but the effect of the body was not as strong as when it was in Valentine's hands. Fate played a trick on him in the end, and Johnny showed his golden spirit in the end, because at that time fate had already called for his exit. Valentine stared at Luchin and began to digest the various messages in his words. Could there be a world he didn't know about? Where did this Oriental man come from? Seeing Valentine's troubled expression, Luchin immediately spoke. "I'm not from this world. Since you've traveled through so many parallel worlds, you should understand that world walls can sometimes be unstable. I won't threaten your country. I have to leave. As long as I kill you before you leave, I can still get the body," Valentine said without changing his expression. "You won't gamble. You don't know how I will leave. If the body is missing the most important spine, I'm afraid your country will never have a chance to be happy again." Luchin continued to bluff. Valentine really wouldn't gamble on whether Luchin could take the body away. He needed to make sure he got the saint's body using the most foolproof means. "How do you prove you're from another world?" Luchin thought for a moment and replied, "As long as there is such a possibility, you can't just sit back and watch. You have the upper hand now. If I deceive you, even if the diamond falls into my hands, you can still take it back." The president was silent for a moment and then agreed to the suggestion. He then said, "I will cover you with my cloak. There are no diamonds in this world. I will take you to another world." Diamonds weren't the most important thing to him. After all, he had already given up many worlds with diamonds. But there was only one copy of the saint's remains, and only the saint's remains could bring happiness to the nation. Luchin bet right that Fonny Valentine would not take such a risk. End of this chapter. Chapter 18 Diamond. As the cloak successfully covered Luchin, the surrounding scene shifted slightly again. A gravely injured Mandentim collapsed to the ground, still alive. Luchin and Valentine returned to the basic world. Then the scene changed again. The president brought Luchin to a new world. He didn't notice Mandentim lying on the ground. A doomed sheriff wouldn't have any impact on his plans. Luchin figured out the mechanism of his teleportation. He could return to the door he had come from, and there was no need to rely on the power of D4C. In other words, the power added by D4C was for round trip. Diego had also used this to return to the previous world from where he came from, so he could return to the basic world on his own without the help of D4C. In this world, there is a president holding a diamond who is waiting for Luchin. It seems that Valentine in this world has successfully obtained the diamond. Valentine said seriously, "Now give me the saint's spine, and I will give you the diamond. I swear to the goddess that I will give you the diamond. I don't know if the diamond in your hand is real. Throw the diamond to me first. If it's real, I will give you the saint's spine. I still want to stay in this world for a while, so I have no reason to lie to you. Since you are willing to give me the diamond, why are you hesitating now?" Valentine was silent for a moment and then threw the diamond away. Luchin immediately used the Steel of Heart to catch the diamond. The moment Lu Chen's double took the diamond, the portal in his mind suddenly glowed. The diamond's power fueled the portal, and now that it was fully charged, Lu Chen immediately knew that this portal could indeed lead to other worlds. However, he didn't know which worlds. He had to push the door open, but once it opened, he would be transported through time. So there was no way to prepare in advance. However, the words he had used to threaten Valentine before became true at this moment. Since there is a means to leave, the fear of fate will not be so deep. Moreover, Lu Chen felt that this diamond could also enhance the ability of the stand, so he would have to study how to use it specifically in the future. I've already given you the diamond. Now give me the saint's spine. Dozens of Valentines spoke in unison, dozens of pistols aimed at Lu Chen simultaneously, and the D4CS were ready to attack at any moment. If Lu Chen violated the agreement, the Valentines would immediately launch an attack. Lu Chen first grinned, then used his substitute to pull the saint's remains out of his body. The remains long to be reunited, so I will not break my promise. I will give you the saint's spine. I also hope that you will be able to gain enough awareness to obtain the complete saint's remains. Fawny Valentine, if you want happiness, you must face disaster. This is your destiny. After Lu Chen finished speaking, heart steel through the saint's spine at Valentine. Lu Chen felt secretly pleased with himself for verbally attacking the president. In comics, it was always the president who verbally attacked others. Valentine used D4C to take the saint's remains that Lu Chen had thrown over. He then laughed loudly and said, I will keep my promise. You and Diamond will stay in this world until you get tired of it and leave. He planned to leave Lu Chen in this world, lest his return affect his plans. He also wasn't about to break his promise to retrieve the diamond. However, he hadn't promised to bring Lu Chen back. For now, he could only stay in this world and fend for himself. He was about to leave this parallel world when his body suddenly sensed that the Oriental man before him still possessed the ears of a saint. The spine was the most important part, so his previous attention had been focused on it. Valentine then stopped and returned to the basic world. Lu Chen looked at Valentine's puzzled expression and explained, I was only talking about the saint's spine. Not all the saint's remains in my possession. So the saint's ears still belong to me. Valentine was puzzled by Lu Chen's actions. Since he was willing to give him the saint's spine, it meant he had no desire for the saint's remains. Regardless of whether his claim of seeking power was true, it made no sense for him to keep the ear in his hands. Valentine then spoke up, since you understand that the remains long to be reunited, why do you want to go against the saint's wishes? If you hand over all the remains to me, you can do whatever you want in this parallel world. After all, you are unique here. When you have had enough fun, you can return to your own world. I will never return to this world again. This is another deal. You have to make a new offer. Valentine hated Lu Chen's greed. But it was good, as greedy people could be made to give up what they had at a price. After a moment's silence, Valentine offered his own advice. Give me the saint's ears, and I'll give you a large sum of money so you can have fun in this world. I can also use my position as president to grant you some privileges. He was ready to give up this world. The basic world was the most important. Lu Chen was somewhat dismissive of this offer. However, he thought for a moment and asked, do you know about insect arrows? Are there arrows in any parallel world? If so, I'm not against making another deal with you. Valentine had never heard of worm arrows, but knowing the request made things easier. He immediately searched for them throughout the infinite worlds. Then, somewhat wearily, he reappeared and said, I've asked my various selves in different worlds, and there's no such thing as you describe. Lu Chen pondered for a moment. Was there no insect arrow here? Was it because the world had been rebooted, or was it for some other reason? It seemed that if he wanted his stand to become Requiem, he would have to go back to the first 4 films. What a shame. It seems you don't have what I need. Valentine threatened, do you think you can leave without handing over the saint's ears? Think about why you made a deal with me. You're not strong enough to make a deal with me. Maybe now I have a new idea and I'm ready to try again. After saying this, Lu Chen immediately covered himself with his cloak again, and in an instant, he was back in the basic world. Leaving was just as easy as coming in. However, it seemed like the trip back and forth between parallel worlds was only once. When Luchin returned to the basic world, the power D4C had applied to the cloak disappeared. After realizing the details of D4C's abilities, Luchin would no longer cover himself with a cloak. The president also appeared and looked at Luchin with a gloomy face. End of this chapter. Chapter 19 Cowboy. The seriously injured Mandentum lay on the ground, watching Luchin appear and disappear repeatedly. There were so many Valentines that he couldn't tell which one was the real one. Wait until Luchin appears beside him again. Mandentum understood that Luchin must also be fighting with the president, and their battle should be taking place in a parallel world. This Oriental man was indeed not on the same side as the president, and he was also fighting his fate in his own way. Since this was the case, I had to help him and absolutely could not let the body fall into the hands of the president. The resurfacing Valentine now harbored murderous intent towards Luchin. Since he had already understood his abilities, he couldn't let him live. Unfortunately, Luchin had the possibility of taking the body away, so he couldn't harbor murderous intent towards him until he got the body. But he couldn't leak his information at will. He was walking on a tightrope. Although you now understand D4C's abilities, victory still rests with me, Valentine. Give me the Saint's ears, and I'll spare your life and the cowboys. Mandentum cried out, "You can't hand over my body to the president. If death is my fate, then let it come. Aren't you afraid that I will just take the saint's body away?" Luchin threatened again. "I understand now. You won't leave now. Even if you truly have the means to do so, you still have things you want to obtain in this world. And you won't leave until you get them." After saying this, Valentine emptied his gun towards Luchin. At this moment, confident. He was able to suppress the two men just now, and this time was no exception. The president's arrogance was fully revealed at this moment. In fact, he was right. Luchin really wanted to stay in this world for a while longer. It wasn't an emergency yet. When that moment came, Luchin would naturally leave immediately. At the moment the bullets hit, the steel of the heart emerged and touched Luchin's clothes. His skin and clothes became hard again and blocked all the attacks. Valentine was not impatient. He first approached Luchin while loading bullets into his pistol, and his stand-in D4C flew towards Luchin. Although the range of D4C is also C, it is smaller than the range of Luchin's stand. All I can say is that there is a gap between C and C. Now his distance does not allow the stand to attack Luchin, so he has to move forward a distance. At this time, Mandentum struggled to break himself into several pieces through the rope. His right hand successfully touched Valentine, and a rope was wrapped around Valentine's right foot. No one paid attention to the seriously injured Mandentum, so he successfully approached the president. Valentine was immediately broken into several parts and put on the rope, and Valentine's attack was immediately alleviated. After doing all this, Mandentum shouted to Luchin, "Take the body to Johnny and the others. Don't give it to Valentine. He is a man who only brings misfortune. Leave here quickly. I will buy you the last time." Then Mandentum whistled, and his mount galloped to Luchin's side. He could easily make the horses obey because Mandentum was the most legendary cowboy. Luchin's stand-in, Mind Steel, touched Mandentum's rope, and the wound that was bleeding began to stiffen. Use this method to stop the bleeding first, and the bleeding will subside as the skin and muscles become stiff. Valentine was distracted for a moment and was ambushed, but this ability with little lethality had no effect on him. D4C turned around and cut the rope that was wrapped around Valentine with a single knife move. Even though the rope had been imbued with the properties of steel, it was rendered useless by the D4C's power. With the rope severed, Valentine successfully recovered. However, Mandentum's right hand was severed by the D4C. Seeing that Luchin had not left yet, Mandentum became a little anxious. "Hurry up, the two of us are no match for the president. Since you fear fate, you know that this is the inevitable fate of mine. Now fate is calling me." Mandentum's remaining left hand wrapped the rope around the president's leg again. Valentine was once again broken into pieces and strung together. The rhythm of the attack was once again interrupted. After seeing Mandentum's determination, Lucian was not a pretentious person. Since he couldn't save Mandentum, he drove his horse forward at a gallop. The body really couldn't fall into the hands of the president yet. As Lucian rode away, he didn't forget to raise his gun and shoot the horse he had ridden. He couldn't leave the president with any means of transport to catch up with him. By the time Valentine returned to normal, Lucian had already ridden away on his horse. Valentine couldn't help but fly into a rage. He could have gotten the saint's ears from the lucky Lucian. As long as he didn't endanger Lucian's life, he would have been able to get the saint's ears. Then, whether Lucian left or was killed wouldn't be a problem. You lowly poor bastard, you're preventing this country from achieving happiness. Valentine angrily kicked Mandentum. A large amount of blood spurted out of Mandentum's mouth, and after he could no longer see Lucian, a smile appeared on his face. Valentine kept cursing him. As a citizen of this country, you should have patriotism for this country, but now you have become an obstacle to the country's happiness. The president's anger towards Mandentum far outweighed his anger towards Lucian, because Lucian looked distinctly Oriental. Furthermore, he came from another world. But Mandentum lacked any patriotism, which made the president feel his beliefs were being insulted by this cowboy. Patriotism? You're just using it as a pretext for your despicable actions. Everything you do is motivated by your vile, shameless, and hateful selfishness. What Mandentum didn't know was that Valentine was really doing these things out of love for his country. But that didn't stop the president from doing despicable things. Just like the name of Fonny Valentine's stand-in Evil is Easy. Those sacrifices are just the cornerstones to happiness, and even the president himself can become this cornerstone. People like you have no way of understanding the greatness of patriotism and will never be able to achieve happiness. After saying that, Valentine fired all the bullets in his pistol at Mandentum. Mandentum glanced toward the rising sun. In his heart, he had already found a place to return to. This was the glorious path that belonged only to cowboys. On this morning, just as the sun cast its rays upon the cowboy's face, the legendary cowboy, Mandentum, died at the hands of Fonny Valentine. Mandentum lived for Lucian and finally died for Lucian. At this moment, fate turned its somewhat deviated trajectory back. End of this chapter. Chapter 20 Evolution. After Gallo confirmed that there were no pursuers catching up. When escaping, Lucian discovered that the president did not bring a horse with him, so Lucian killed the horse he stole. When the sun was high overhead, he paused for a moment. Since Mandentum had used his life to hold Valentine back for him, he had to help him realize his last words. Lucian decided to give the saint's ears to Johnny and Jiro. This was a man's promise. Lucian knew that his wisest choice was to trade the saint's ears to the president, and then use the president's power to find the Rokakaka fruit in a parallel world. He thought there was nothing else he could obtain in this world. However, not everything is based on profit. It's like Lucian said that Jello's death was fate, but he still told Jello the information because Lucian hoped that Jello could defeat fate and survive. He would wait until the remains of the saints were gathered together and then see if he had any hope of getting them, but Lucian didn't have much hope for this. The body will not be owned by anyone, and fate will inevitably stop you the moment you want to take it away. As for the president, Lucian naturally wanted to find an opportunity to retaliate. It had nothing to do with any position, only personal grudges. Lucian thought that after he overturned the president's car, he would get some money and go to New Guinea to look for the Rokakaka fruit. After finding the fruit, he would leave this world. I just feel a little regretful about Mandentum's final realization. It's a pity that after struggling, Mandentum still couldn't defeat his fate. However, it can also be said that Mandentum took the initiative to face his own fate. What about Enrin? Has fate overtaken this man who escaped a certain fate? Perhaps he has been destroyed along with his tribe. Maybe Enrin was still alive, but he didn't look like someone who could face his fate calmly, especially since he was so anxious to save his sister. While riding a horse at a gallop, his mind was wandering. After walking all morning, Lucian realized that not only was he exhausted, but his horse was also extremely tired. If they continued walking like this, they would not be able to hold out for much longer. So Lu Chen found a shady place and stopped the horse. Both he and the horse needed to rest for a while. Lu Chen dismounted and took out the water bottle from the horse's back. Then, leaning against a tree, he slowly drank from it. After finishing the water, he took a long breath. The feeling of hunger immediately appeared. After a morning of running around, Lu Chen was thirsty and hungry. After a short rest, he took out a few extremely hard biscuits from the bag on his horse's back and started to chew them. These extremely hard biscuits could be used to block bullets. It took him a lot of effort to swallow the biscuit crumbs in his mouth. Being a cowboy is not an easy job. After taking a few casual bites, Lu Chen finally had time to experiment to see what use the diamond he had obtained before could have. Everyone in the parallel world was fighting for this thing, so it should be quite precious. Lu Chen took out the diamond containing magical power from his arms and looked at it carefully. The diamond sparkles in the sunlight, and just by holding it in your hand, you can feel the powerful power contained in the diamond. Since it is a magical item in JoJo, this diamond is most likely used to strengthen the stand. So it is definitely not something that can be used by the stand itself. If it were Jian Luhen, he would know how to use it. Thinking of this, Lu Chen threw the diamond above his head, and his substitute, the steel of body and mind, emerged and took the diamond. No magical changes occurred. Lu Chen wondered if he had to manipulate his avatar to eat the diamond. However, he quickly dismissed this unrealistic idea. No matter how he thought about it, it was definitely not how it should be used. He then placed the diamond on the double's face and shone it in the sun, but it didn't do anything, so Kaz said he was an expert. It seems that the usage is different from that of Aija Redstone. When the diamond was close to the double's chest, the golden heart began to beat violently. So Lu Chen placed the diamond through the hollowed-out gap next to the golden heart. The moment it touched the heart, the diamond melted and turned into a liquid that flowed into the heart. Fortunately, the middle part of the stand-in's body is hollowed out. Lu Chen also felt that something seemed to appear in his heart, and the substitute affected the real body. A faint glow seemed to emanate from the double surface, but it quickly disappeared. After the diamonds were fully integrated, the stand's appearance did not change much, except that the gears on the shoulders became diamonds, which were crystal clear. Previously, the gears were brass. The stand evolved due to the power of the diamond, but it did not evolve to the level of Requiem. It's like upgrading from Tooth 1 to Tooth 2. Now Lu Chen can impart more subtle types of metal properties to soft objects, rather than being limited to the characteristics of common metals such as strength and conductivity. However, the radioactive and chemical properties were not enhanced. Perhaps such an improvement would only be achieved when the insect arrow pierced the chest. Thinking of this, Lu Chen once again hoped that the world behind the door was the first 4 parts. For him, as long as he could go to the first 4 parts, the insect arrows would be very easy to obtain. The stand-in touched Lu Chen's arm, and the flesh and blood on his arm immediately began to flow. At this moment, the arm successfully possessed the fluidity of mercury, but bones were not soft objects, so there was still no change. If you need to dodge a bullet this way, you'll need to avoid your own bones. Furthermore, the bullet is more likely to embed itself in your flesh than to pass through it. Therefore, it is better to use hard skin to withstand bullets. This kind of fluid application can be used to heal wounds. When blood and flesh can also flow, wounds can naturally be easily healed. Fake Crazy Diamond Restoration Items. The real Crazy Diamond acts directly on the flesh and blood. The ability obtained by using diamonds can be called Crazy Diamond. Generally speaking, after this evolution, Lu Chen's means of dealing with enemies are more diverse, and from now on he can act as a semi-nursing nurse. However, the effect is far inferior to that of Hetpan's Frost Traveler. Then, Hetpan's application of Frost Traveler gave Lu Chen some inspiration. If flesh and blood could flow, then he could naturally change his appearance. Although height and weight could not be changed, the face could be modified. He did it right away, and soon Lu Chen's appearance changed. This ability of mine is just a simplified version of Frost Traveler. After a short rest, Lucien set out on his journey again. Now he was going to catch up with Johnny and Jello. The good news was that the distance between them should not be too far. End of this chapter.